or glasses permitted, you'll be able to watch comments that are on the screen there. And then over on the left-hand side, when it goes live in 30 seconds, you'll be able to see the screen of what we look like. And then, of course, like I say, this is recorded, and we'll be able to play it back anytime we need to. Right here. This is our office. Yep. Yeah.
If we need to, maybe we can rotate this whole thing over.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay, there we go.
My son and Joe graduated from West Point together back in 22 years ago.
Yep. How many? Yep. 22 years ago, 2 days ago, 3 days ago. May 29th is our
Happy anniversary.
anniversary. We're live?
Yes. It's going to be delayed on the screen, though.
It'll be delayed
This
on the
will be
screen.
delayed, but
Okay,
this
but
is
we're-
live.
But we're live down there. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody that's here today, as well as those that are watching as a part of the MobilityATX live forum. We're coming to you today from the Ride Scout studios, if you will, here in downtown Austin, Texas, at the intersection of 6th and Brazos. Today's panel is looking at commuting as a part of the overall MobilityATX pilot that's been going on now for several weeks and will conclude on June 23rd. I just, as the host, want to introduce our guests with this distinguished panel, and then turn it over to Michael Kanan, our moderator. But on this side, Jim Dale, the Assistant Director for Transportation for the City of Austin. Next to him is Ward Tisdale, who is the President of RECO, which is the Real Estate Association for Austin.
Correct.
And then Michael Kanan, yeah, exactly, Michael Kanan from the Austin Monitor was our moderator today. And then Linda Watson, who is the CEO of Capital Metro here for Austin, Texas. And then Bob Harkins, who is the Assistant Vice President for Safety and Security for the University of Texas at Austin, one of the largest universities in the nation. So, and I am Joseph Kopser, the CEO and co-founder of Ride Scout, and we're thrilled to have you guys here participating, and more importantly, to have you all here participating. I know your time is busy, so we'll launch right into it. Michael.
Thanks, Joseph. And just to be clear, if you guys, I'm going to try to get you guys in on each question. Feel free to interject if you have any thoughts. We really just want to hear your opinions mostly. So we'll start with you, Jim. What is the state of transportation in Austin, Texas?
State of transportation in Austin, Texas. I think we experience that every morning and every afternoon. It's congested at times. What the city of Austin is looking at doing about that, what we're working on is a number of different areas and working with our partners like Capital Metro here at the table, other regional partners too. But we look at all the different modes, whether you're walking, biking, on transit, driving your car. We're trying to make travel, give you choices to choose. Which one of those ways do you want to travel? And if we have more people walking or biking or on transit, that's less cars on the road. So the folks who do travel, they benefit from in the car, by car, they benefit as well.
Okay, Ward, state of transportation.
Pretty much what Jim said.
Is this what we're going to get down the line, maybe?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult situation. We need more road capacity. We need other forms of transportation. But I am personally a fan of transit, and RECA itself supported Proposition 1 last year. It failed quite significantly, but I think we need to continue to build our capacity. The North MoPac expansion will be happening later this year, and then I-35 needs improvements as well. But I personally would love to see us, and I've talked to Linda about this, really expand our BRT system, because I think that's the easiest way to get from A to B.
Linda, state of transportation, specifically with regard to Cap Metro.
Well, we're behind the curve in all areas across the board here in Central Texas, and we're playing catch up a little bit. We were able to launch Bus Rapid Transit a couple of years ago, a few years before that, Metro Rail, and just in a couple of weeks, we're going to be implementing additional frequency on 5 of our highest performing routes to try to make it more efficient, to give people more options so that transit becomes a first choice for them. I think we have a lot of opportunities to make improvements.
Just real fast, those routes, the 5 routes that you're going to improve in the coming weeks, which are those, just real fast?
In general, they serve the area around Runberg, Govali, South Lamar, Riverside. I'm leaving one out. I'll give you the numbers in a second.
Okay, thank you, man. Bob, state of transportation.
Well, I think to understand the state of transportation in regards to the University of Texas in Austin is kind of understand the university itself. We have about 53,000 students. We have about 17,000 staff and faculty, throw in there 3,000 visitors a day. And you got a city of about 70,000 inside the actual city limits of Austin. I'm certain that everybody in Austin knows today was kind of the first day that we've had with no classes in session. And it used to be that was a tremendously relieving time period. Unfortunately, it's not as relieving as it was in the past because there's a lot of other people that have filled in our absence of transportation right now. We rely very heavily on transit. We have, as I mentioned, 70,000 people. We've got about 15,000 parking spaces, and when you add it up, it doesn't work. One of the biggest fears I have is everybody decides they want to drive to work every day. We put about 7 million passengers that are, and I use my words very chosenly, fare free. We're paying for it, but to the consumer, all they have to do is swipe their ID card. And we got about 7 million passengers a year that we use on Capital Metro, either for shuttle routes that come directly to the University of Texas or our mainline routes that come through campus. So if you take those out, we're able to kind of manage it. There's the days when you got 100,000 for a football game, or you got bad weather that really complicate things. But by and large, I think that the University of Texas has tried to implement many alternative transportation programs, which I'm certain we can talk about, to try and alleviate the traffic problems in the city of Austin.
Joseph.
Well, I think that the state of transportation in Austin needs to be organized, bringing it together. And so that's really a part of our mission, is to provide that seamless door-to-door travel for all. And when we say for all, I like to double underline that, because mobility is so connected to a person's ability to get to education, to get to a job that pays living wages, to get out to see the people that they want to see in their life, and recreation and entertainment, that if we don't do a better job of organizing it all well, that mobility and limited access and limited availability is going to have an impact on upward mobility. We already know that as a city, we have a terrible problem with socioeconomic segregation. So by bringing the systems together for mobility, we're optimistic in the future that it'll really bring the city back together again.
Okay. I'm going to move on to, and that's a great segue to the next question, which is, who on the panel rides? And I'll say that I do not ride Metro Rail as a habit, or Cat Metro buses. Wondering who here does, and if you do you find it to be a practical method of transportation for all your needs getting around? And if you don't, why don't you? Go ahead, Jess. I think I know the answer.
So I take the bus, but I can't take the bus door to door. One of the reasons why is, even though Cat Metro extended commuter service into my neighborhood, the hours happen so early that I either have to choose between having breakfast with my daughters, which I'm blessed to be able to do, or catch the bus. So instead, what I do is I have breakfast with my daughters and then drive in a little bit to catch the terminal point of the 803. Then I catch the bus and take it the rest of the way in. So it works, but it's not as connected as I hope it could be.
Bob?
Well, I personally have used rail, I'd say maybe 5 times. I live out in the country west of Georgetown, so it's a 20-minute ride to get to the rail and then the ride in, and it kind of balances out that it's just as easy to drive in. I usually come in about 5:30 in the morning, leave campus about 7 o'clock at night, so I avoid at least a little bit of the rush hour, if you will.
Linda?
I ride the bus. I take the 300 and also the 801 to get to work, transfer downtown, depending on which route I take to get back and forth to work, and also when I come downtown.
Does it serve all your needs?
It doesn't serve all my needs, especially when I'm going from meeting to meeting in a lot of different places, but I take it as often as I can.
Ward, I think you did an experiment with this, right?
Yeah, I did my 30 days off the road experiment in January and February, after the lawn had failed so miserably. I was like, let me do an assessment of what transit is like, and I found it pretty easy, actually. I take the number 5, took it this morning. I take it 1 to 3 times a week to work and back. But when I'm downtown and I have a meeting somewhere, I'll use car to go. If I have a meeting, an event after work, especially based on those DUI charts you showed, Joe, I'll take Uber or Lyft. So there are ways to get around town without a car. It just takes a little creativity, a little imagination, and a little effort.
Jim?
Where we live and our lifestyle with kids and so forth, we'll take the number 3 occasionally to come down to work. But typically we're driving a car, just with the flexibility with our family commitments as well as work. But the other thing that we try to do is with our kids is try to encourage them to take transit, especially for the events downtown. As they're getting older now and can ride transit, we feel very comfortable with them taking transit coming on down to an event instead of trying to drive down, find a place to park.
Let's stipulate that given, I think that I'm actually surprised by the amount of folks up here who are riding the bus. I think we can stipulate that there are some aspects of the many aspects of Austin culture that is car driven, that is automobile centric. When we think strategically, and that means in your departments and in your daily lives, do we take this into account, do you think? How, and do you think it requires a different sort of mass or collective transit planning, given the fact that we are an automobile-centric city? Go ahead, Jim.
Well, for us, again, back to the opening question, we're doing a number of things for all the different types of modes. I can talk to how we're working with Capital Metro right now and how we look forward to working with them even more in the future. Is that for the Metro Rapid that we launched here in the past year or two, is that we implemented, worked with them, coordinated to provide transit signal priority to help expedite them get through the signals, to have less delay at the signals, more reliable travel times. And in return for that, what we're hoping is that encourages or attracts more people to ride transit. So we're looking, one of the things that we'd like to do is look at opportunities to expand transit signal priority beyond just the Metro Rapid lines. We see opportunities across a number of maybe even the 5 routes that were mentioned earlier, maybe good candidates for signal priority. We're also working with the bus lanes. Guadalupe and Lavaca is probably the most visible project that we've done in terms of express lanes for the buses. Those seem to be working well. Mm-hmm. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. We look at all the different modes, and we're doing something for each of them. I can talk more about that in a little bit too.
Before we get into the rest of the answers, I do want to do this. Dedicated lanes for those bus rapid transits. What do you think about that? Can the city do anything in that direction?
And where we have additional room, like Guadalupe and Lavaca, we did the lanes there, and plus we have a high transit frequency. That's the one thing that any place that we're looking at, we have to have that high transit frequency, or we have the folks who are taking those other modes, they're seeing maybe sometimes that lane is empty at times. Why can't I use that? I'll get a ticket if I get in there and drive in that lane. So we just have to be mindful about the different uses. Every corridor is different in terms of what trips we're trying to serve there and what modes. We look at them individually and develop a solution for that particular road.
Do you think it would be helpful for them? I know that they're dedicated, but if there was something more solid, because there was a solid wall or something aesthetic that sort of separates the bus line from the rest of traffic.
And what we've seen across the country is as we have more of the dedicated lanes, we can increase the reliability of transit and also improve the travel times. As far as my opinion on having a barrier in there, it depends on how it's designed. If we were just to put up a barrier right down the roadway there, I look at that's something for someone to run into. That provides less accessibility maybe for the other modes of bicyclists as well as emergency vehicles and pedestrians. Okay. So it's just really mindful on the location, what we're trying to achieve, and looking at the context of that location and what really works for that.
Okay. We're going to come back to your word because I do want to get Linda to pick up directly on what Jim was just saying. What do you think? Dedicated lanes for DOT. It's been a hot topic, I think on the MobilityATX side as well.
I think if you look across the country, you will see transit systems that have dedicated lanes, HOV lanes or bus priority lanes, whatever they are. They have a much higher percentage of people using transit. Houston is a great example. About 30%, I think it's over 30% of people who are going downtown for work are getting there by transit, and a lot of the reason is they're in dedicated lanes, they're on HOV lanes, their travel times are predictable, they're whizzing by cars that are stuck in traffic, and that works in many communities. We're challenged here with that because even though we're a little bit spread out, we don't have a lot of opportunities for expansion of bus-only lanes. In fact, in most cases, in order to do that, we would take away right-of-way from automobiles. So it's kind of a catch-22. However, having said that, I look forward to working with the city to see if there are any areas in the community where we can do more of that, even if it's just portions of a route. Also, the signalization that keeps the traffic lights green for buses to move through. It has really seemed to be working really well for us, so I want to explore more things like that. So I wanted to kind of step back and evaluate the bus priority lanes we have on Guadalupe Lavaca. Also look at all the a massive amount of data that we've collected on the signalization and use that to see if we can refine it, improve it, or expand it to other areas. So I think that's something coming up that we can look forward to.
In the near future, you think?
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping that we'll be able to collect that data and look at it, but even beyond looking at the data, look at other areas in the community where there might be some possibilities. And if I could add one more thing at the expense of talking too much here. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because you mentioned it takes time to plan your trip on transit, whereas sometimes just getting in a car and driving to a parking garage doesn't take a lot of thought. And that's one of the reasons that we have included technology as part of the system. We have our mobile app, our trip planning, and then also our buy and use your pass on the phone. So we're trying to make it easier for people who want to use transit as an option.
Well, that sets up a nice segue for Joseph. You want to go ahead and talk about what you guys are up to?
Yeah, so what we want to do is organize everything that's out there. So we want to not only take, which we've already done, which is all of Cap Metro's routes, the rail and the bus, put them all into a trip planning tool in RideScout, also brought in the mobile ticketing component, but we also want to take other programs that are out there like B-Cycle, Car2Go, wrap it together, and then in the future going forward, we want to work with huge organizations like the University of Texas, the state of Texas employees, the city of Austin employees, and get into those van pool, carpool programs that they have, and then combine them with other large employers that are downtown and start to weave that. Because we may not need to add more lanes if we can get more people per car in one car. Right now, with 76% of all the cars on the road with only one person, that's really the capacity problem that we have, is that during surge times in the morning and the evening, there's not enough. So technology provides an enabler to that by making it so somebody can very simply see it. And the more they can do in one spot, like what we're trying to do with RideScout, is the goal. But we want to bring non-standard programs in there too, not to mention stuff like the various programs and rideshare programs and carpool programs that large employers like the University of Texas has.
Okay, great. Ward, now I want to come back to you and talk a little bit about, from your perspective as a representative of interest in the downtown sector. Is all of this enough? Are we doing enough to get folks moving again in the city?
Well, I think we just need to promote what the options are. Again, we do have a capacity problem. As Joseph just said, 76 people are riding by themselves. 76% of people are riding by themselves. We're never going to fix that. And so if we just had people using other options like transit, like the bus, obviously transit is the bus, but Car2Go, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Linda mentioned BRT. When that North Mopac managed lane opens up later this year or next year, I bet you're going to see a lot of people using that to get downtown, because you're going to see them flying down those managed lanes while other people are in traffic. So, okay. And fortunately, South Mopac looks to be expanding by 2 lanes in each direction, hopefully. And so that'll be another opportunity. And why not have a managed lane on I-35? So if people have the option, if they can see the result, and to say that Houston has 30% people going downtown by bus, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you never would have seen that. So I think there's definitely hope for the future.
And I definitely want to come back to that Houston thing, because that's been talked about a lot. But for now, Bob, I do want to ask you about how the University of Texas plays into this. Given the general transportation picture, you talked a little bit about how just generally how the university is. But
Sure.
But are the tools on the ground? From UT's side too, are the tools on the ground to get done?
Well, I think it's. I kind of mentioned the general demographics of the university, but of the 53,000 students, we only have 7,500 who live on campus. So the other 46,000 are out in the community somewhere. They have clumped together in pockets throughout the city, and that's where we've worked with Capital Metro to run direct shuttle routes from those locations to campus. So a lot of students will bring their car to campus, but leave it at their apartment and then ride the shuttle in and out, or maybe at nighttime then bring their car on campus. I think that it's important for everybody to understand that the concept of free and parking should never go together in the same sentence. There is no such thing as free parking. While we may go to the Barton Creek Mall and don't pay for it, somebody's paying for that, either in the price you're paying at the store, the rent, whatever. Somebody's paying for the parking. It's the same thing at the University of Texas. You pay for your permit, whether you're staff, faculty, or student. I pay for my permit. But yet, if you go to the state garages, they all park for free. So, I'm paying for that as a taxpayer in the state of Texas. So maybe some of those employers need to sort out that there is no such thing as free parking. Everybody's got to participate. And we participate not only in providing parking garages, it's an auxiliary. It doesn't use any of the state dollars or tuition dollars. It's paid for by the parkers themselves. But we also have a bicycle program. We've got about 4,000 bicycles registered on campus. We're working with the city right now on the bike sharing program, or how we're going to develop that. We do have the daily use cars of Zipcar and Car2Go on campus and around campus. We even provide buses home on the weekend to Dallas, to Houston, and down to San Antonio. That means that if you bring in a student to the University of Texas, they don't have to have a car to come home. We'll pick them up, and it's amazing. You see the guys bringing their dirty laundry, and the young ladies bringing their books. I'm not certain what that means, but if you go down there and watch it, that's kind of what you see. In addition to that, we do have van pools. We do have car pools. We think that we offer 18 pre-parks a year if you have a car pool. So, there's some incentive built in to try and build these programs. And I think Blanca Gaines has done a great job in trying to build these programs to make certain they really are a vital piece of what we do. If, like I say, if all of a sudden all those would fall apart and everybody decide to come to campus by driving or something like that, we'd have a big problem.
Okay. I'm going to move on here, but I want to make sure that nobody's got anything else to add on this topic. We good? All right. This is over the transom, and I'm not sure if it's via Twitter or somewhere else, but here's the question, and we'll start with Linda on it. Why can't Cap Metro level the cost of commuter and Metro rapid bus service? The few extra fare dollars cannot possibly be worth the confusion, disconnectivity, and inequality that fare incompatibility causes. What do you think?
This is something we really studied. I think it was about 3 years ago. We had a fare study that did a benchmark, looking at what we had at the time, also comparing us with our peers and others across the country, and then look at the increased revenue opportunities throughout the whole system, and the levels of service that we provide. And we provide several levels of service. We have our local bus service that, for the most part, operates on major arterials, but they also go into the neighborhoods. There's a significant significant number of stops. They stop fairly frequently. And then we have our commuter service, what we call our flyers. They're park and ride or express services that will generally pick up in one area and then express to the final destination. And then also we have bus rapid transit that has fewer stops, higher level of service, a lot of technology involved in it. And then, of course, our Metro Rail service that is pretty congestion proof in itself. So we price, based on the fare study and the recommendations of that study, we price the various levels of service based on whether we would consider them local or premium service. So that's why you have a bit of a price difference, but it's based on the type of service, which is not uncommon.
I'm going to read a little bit into this question and guess that this person's maybe getting at the idea that the disparity in prices perhaps drives down usage. Do you see any evidence of that?
It's hard to say. I wouldn't be surprised if there are people not riding the higher price services because of price, but we see our ridership increasing over and over, month over month. So the services are doing well, even though the prices are a little higher.
Go ahead, Jason.
On that note, I think the model that Bob has at the University of Texas, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, with your student ID card or faculty ID card, you get to ride public transit all modes, right?
All modes.
All modes. And that's very simple. And so when I was teaching at the University of Texas, I loved the freedom of whether it was the 111, the 171, whatever, I could hop on anything. It was one shop, one pay. in line with what Mayor Adler is saying about let's just try it, one of the things that we want to do at Ride Scout, and if anybody listening or here today, let's do it, is come up with a mobility allowance, a one set cost price for mobility that with that subscription would be Car2Go, would be Zipcar, would be Austin B-Cycle, would be a Metro Pass. So there wouldn't be any confusion about what they're paying. The rates would all vary by mode, but they wouldn't vary within a mode. And it would basically be paying as you go. And so that's what we want to do, working with employers, trying new things, very similar to what the University of Texas has already started.
But I would just add, if they could, we're paying for it from the University of Texas. The students voted to pay a fee, and we use that to buy hours of service from Capital Metro or per ride getting on. We also, the staff and faculty basically run off the vending contract with the profits off the vending machine. Unfortunately, vending's going down and prices are going up, so we've got some problems there. But it isn't, I use the terminology fare free. Doesn't cost any of our users anything. We sort it out on the backside of Capital Metro in terms of how many of this type and how many of that type rides we have.
Is it a problem for the university?
No. It's only a problem in that, the slope is up in terms of cost. When you look at, the insurance, the driver's hours, wages, fuel, all of that, we negotiate very hard with Capital Metro to try and get the best deal we can for the university. And we're putting a lot of passengers on their vehicles.
Okay. I think I'm going to move on to the Houston example because it was raised, unless anybody got anything else to add there. Okay. Jim, we'll start with you. I take it you probably paid attention to what Houston just did to its bus routes.
Tell me some more.
Just
Sure, we're on the same
reimagining.
topic.
The reimagining of Houston's bus lines, rave reviews from what I understand about just a simple sort of reconfiguration of the way that they do their bus lines. From what you know about Austin's transportation system, is that something that could work here?
Really be a question for.
I know I was going to go around the horn, but I did want to get your take on it, given that you are a transportation.
I think especially the city's relationship with the state, because state controls MOPAC, city controls most of the other routes, how we could get more dedicated lanes, because that's one of the reasons why the reimagining is going to be successful.
I think it's back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about dedicated lanes. It's looking for those opportunities around town. Austin is growing, and there's opportunities growing with that around town to service them with transit or to other forms of transportation too. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, it comes back to, I think there are going to be opportunities. I think in any system that you're operating, you're going to find opportunities if you study it closely, and where you can provide better travel for different folks in that group. From our side, we're a partner with Capital Metro. Things that we can do, if it's looking at possibly reserving lane, dedicated lanes, signal priority, queue jumps. There's a number of different strategies that we can use for transit to help improve its reliability and reduce its travel times. And so whatever those, Capital Metro pursues a very, starts looking at the routes, which I'm sure they do on a regular basis. But anytime that they see an opportunity, we'd be willing to work with them, talk with them, and see what we can bring to the table.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ward.
Mike, I just wanted to.
Yeah, please.
I hadn't said it yet, so I want to make sure I don't go this hour without doing it. But we're in this mess in the first place because of the way we've developed in terms of a sprawling community. We've not grown densely like we should have. I think our population has grown 150% since 1980. We are less dense today than we were in 1980. We're less dense than Houston and Dallas. So that, at a high level, that's one reason we're in this big mess in the first place. And if we don't change that, if we don't grow the central part of our city in a more dense way, these issues are going to keep going over and repeating themselves over and over. So I just want to make sure we all get that on the table, because that's very important. Code Next, Imagine Austin, those can fix that problem, but it's going to take collective will of the city to do that.
Can I jump in and add something
Please.
to
Yeah,
that?
please do.
In addition to the density and the issues that Ward mentioned, the other thing that plays into this is affordability. The majority of people moving to Austin now are moving to the smaller communities around us because it's too expensive to live in town. And those are people who would more likely use transit. Many of them are living in communities that aren't even covered in Capital Metro's service area. So it's a little bit of a double whammy for us, if you will.
Well, what do you think about the Houston solutions idea of reconfiguring the bus routes? I guess they maximize their routes, their capacities. Is that something we can do? It seems like a relatively low-cost option.
First, let me say, Houston has the plan. They have not implemented it yet, so we don't know the results.
Sure.
And Capital Metro has been moving towards that model. About every 5 years, we do a major study of our entire network and look at whether it needs to be reconfigured based on growth, population, development. And we are finishing up the 5th year of that 5-year plan, which allowed us to look at operating on major corridors and eliminating service that was really unproductive. With the implementation of our frequent network that we're doing in a couple of weeks, that's the last recommendation of that study. So we'll be looking at this later this year, doing another 5-year study that will, again, give us an opportunity to look at the entire network and possibly do more if that's the need. The problem we have today, if I can just add this real quickly, even though we want to get more people on buses to address the congestion issue, there's also neighborhoods that really need and want service. And sometimes it's hard to do both. You can't do everything. You have to prioritize. So we're going to have some interesting decisions to make, very hard decisions to make as we move forward.
Well, I would add just to comment, this is from the outsider looking in. I'm sitting pretty close to Linda now, so when she whacked me. But there's an awful lot of communities that we have staff, faculty, and even some students that live in that are outside the Capital Metro service area. So as long as, we're going to continue to drive in because other, than driving to a pickup point or whatever, but it's very hard to convince someone to take this mode, then that mode, then this mode to get here. And if we ever sat down as a region and re-looked at Capital Metro service area and came to a better agreement with the other communities in terms of partnership, if you will, or participation, I think we could begin to address some of these issues.
Linda, have you guys considered that?
Can I give a plug for some communities that are exactly doing that? We're working right now with Georgetown, Round Rock, Pflugerville, Hutto. Seems like there's one more, and they are literally in the process of developing, putting together transit development plans, which is the very first step for getting transit in their communities. Part of the problem we have, they are, all the surrounding communities are capped out on their sales tax and could not join Capital Metro if they wanted to, but they are looking at providing service, paying for it through their general fund or whatever mechanism they have.
Maybe we get the legislature to drive back and forth every day. They'll kind of figure out a solution to help everybody. Because, when you come down the I-35 corridor from Georgetown in, it's murder. It's murder going home, and it's murder for people who come in. It would be nice if there was, and I'm arguing with the mobility committee now that there sure seems like a lot of trucks, and they keep telling me they're all coming to do deliveries downtown, but I don't know, they seem to pop out on the other end an awful lot too.
Yeah, so on that note, and I think this is where real estate, circling back to your point about density, so if we have these, and I don't even mean just the outward communities, it's outward neighborhoods, outlying neighborhoods of Austin that are outside the regular service hours of Cap Metro. I'm a huge proponent for using available land that's already there to create a system of park and rides that other cities enjoy that we don't have as many. And a great example is movie theaters. There are several big movie theaters at terminal points for various bus lines, and not even terminal points. They just have to be adjacent to those lanes. That during the day, movie theaters don't have full capacity in their parking lot, which is when people would be needing to park their car during the day. And in the evening, when they're leaving, they're backhauling out, making space for people moving in. I would love to see more cooperation between real estate side of it, the city to incentivize it, Cap Metro to advertise it, because there's one movie theater in particular on the south end, without naming names, that has big honking signs that say, no parking for Capital Metro riders, you will be towed.
Is there anything that anybody can do about that? Is that just a private sort of lot that Linda, what do you think?
Well, I will tell you, we've had better luck with churches and being able to use their parking facilities. We have several that we use, and We do often have issues with private development, movie theaters, grocery stores, and others that have facilities, but working with churches has been pretty successful. And we pay to park there. We
And I
pay
think
to
that,
use the
the
facilities.
University of Texas uses them like, you can go to a lot of the parking rides when we're not in session, and, there's a lot more space than it is. And so we keep beating on Cap Metro all the time to, come on, let's open up some more parking rides, because we think that there is, we got a lot of people. We look at our demographics, we work that with Capital Metro in terms of where our staff and faculty are living. It gets back to the economic thing. A lot of our incoming staff and faculty have a tough time living in Austin, live in the outer communities. So the more we do to develop transit, the better off it is. And that's one of the reasons, when people holler at me about paying for parking, my comment is, I give you, there's a fare free ride if you want to take the Capital Metro, or you can pay to park.
Jim, I'm sorry, go ahead. You were going to look like you were. Well, I was just going to ask, you said a few moments ago that the city would do what it could with its resources to help out. Is this something you guys can help with, the parking issue?
I think with parking in general, and especially in this particular instance, and it sounds like Capital Metro is already doing so, it's a conversation with those private property owners. It is their property. They decide what can be done on it. But having that conversation, it sounds like it's something that Capital Metro has done and pursued. And it's something that we do all the time in dealing with transportation around town, is dealing with property owners, businesses, citizens.
Sure. Okay, I want to move down to a specific suggestion from the MobilityATX website. As some of you out there in internet land know, this is an ongoing conversation, ideas posted about solutions. We've been over two specific solutions from that site. One is dedicated bus lanes, and then the other would be more density in the urban core. A third that came up, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, specifically relates to the 1 and the 3. I'm sure this is something that you guys have heard a lot, and I think that there's a 48-page PowerPoint online if anybody wants to see the argument. And I think the concern from some folks is whether or not Metro Rapid Service has come at the expense of core commuters, whether or not it's sort of distanced, regular local service. The lack of regular local service makes it less practical for folks to ride the bus downtown. What do you think, Linda? Are you guys going to review the status of the 1 and the 3? Are you comfortable with where things are right now?
When we opened up the Metro Rapid service, we evaluated the 1 and the 3. We needed additional service, so we added trips. We saw that there were overloads, and we're continually monitoring those routes. So we are looking at that. One of the solutions that we're also looking at is having additional stops on our Metro Rapid service that would serve some of those trips as well. So we're looking at various things, but yes, absolutely, we're open to adding service if we need to those services.
Okay. I think that unless anybody wants to get in on that one, we'll move along to, and you guys hinted at it, I think you specifically, Bob, the regulatory environment and the fiscal environment in Texas. Is there something about being in Texas that makes this all more difficult, more easy? What do you think? I mean, what are you all doing to work with these issues? To start with you, Jim.
Working with the regulatory issues, for us, I'm just trying to think through the number of things that laws that we have. And some of the laws, let me take try to take a specific example, how we're trying to use some of those laws to help improve transportation. One of the things that the mayor and our city council and city manager have pursued is this traffic congestion action plan. And one of those things that we're seeing, especially in downtown and also in other parts of town, is people who are trying to get into town, it gets congested, and they'll block the intersection. And so we have this campaign for Don't Block the Box.
Right.
It's something that the police already enforce, and it's something that we're trying to pursue, We have a program right now, a pilot, where we're working on Cesar Chavez, and we'll look at moving out to other parts of town. Some of the other, so that's just one area, very specific, but also on the regulatory side. Let's say the other area that we would like to see too is opportunity for buses to ride on shoulders of the freeways too. Another great opportunity to provide incentive, performance improvement for transit, but also incentive for more people to ride transit. Mm-hmm. So opportunities for that as well. Those are probably the best two examples.
Or when you guys think about transit, when you guys think about the state, what tools are out there that you'd love to see the locals use?
Well, let me sort of morph that into, when you said regulatory environment, I will say in terms of building and getting things permitted in this town,
Go for
to
it.
provide that density, the city needs to do a much better job so that we can get that supply and get the corridors in our community built in a vertical intense way. Linda mentioned the affordability problem. One reason we have an affordability problem is we don't have enough supply. We don't have enough supply and high demand, prices go up. On the transit side, you know, I don't know exactly what TxDOT does in terms of allocating funds for transit, but I don't think it's really high. I think it's very road centric, and Texas is a big state. We need roads, but I think it would be beneficial for our community if we got some of those TxDOT funds to help with our transit system.
Linda, you're sort of at the center of this. What do you think? Regulations in Texas.
Well, there is one thing we've been talking about recently, and that's pullouts at bus stops for buses to get out of the traffic when they're boarding and alighting passengers. And but before I came here, I was in Orlando at the transit system, and there was a state law that if a bus was in a pullout, that you had to stop to let it back into traffic. And we had bus pullouts at all of our major stops, and it worked really well. We're out of the congestion as we're boarding and alighting. And I would love to see more of that here. The problem is once a bus does get out of the lane of traffic, it sometimes really can't get back in. It's almost impossible. So if there's a way to allow that to happen, regulatory is one way, there might be others, but that comes to mind. In addition to buses on shoulders, which is good.
A no-brainer.
Yeah.
But pass.
Please go.
Add to that. One art director, Robert Spiller, has mentioned before some opportunities through technology. So when the buses do pull out of the lane and we realize they can't get trapped, and then that hits their service quality, which then impacts ridership. There's maybe some, with the signals, there's some opportunities, especially our pedestrian hybrid beacons, the pedestrian crossings, the signalized ones. If certain types of designs can be implemented to where the bus pulls out, pulls beyond that, but then when the bus is ready to leave, it triggers a sensor that causes the pedestrian hybrid beacon to come up and allows that bus back into the lane. So there may be some technology opportunities there too.
Let me also say, I don't want to oversell this idea. It will work in some areas, but probably not all because of right-of-way. You're going to have right-of-way to be able to get the buses off the road. So we would be limited. I don't know what the potential is, but I think there's some out there that, and every little bit helps. And if you look at all the studies, we need it all. So.
Have you seen the signals at a bus bus pull out work before? Have you seen other cities that do it?
We've just seen some research that's been done on looking at that as an alternative to help provide that better service for the transit, and it looks promising. We've seen some. I'm trying to remember the article that I read. I can't remember if it was over in Europe or it's here in the States, but it was that same concept of having some type of signal that would stop traffic to allow that bus to enter back into the lane. So again, just so that they can maintain good service quality.
Okay. Linda, do you feel like you have the fiscal tools to do what you need? I mean, does the state give you what you need?
Well, first of all, we rarely get state funding. We're very fortunate in this last year. We received money, $50 million from TxDOT for in expanding the capacity on our red line. It is standing room only during peak. So we'll be able to double capacity and frequency of that service. But other than that, we don't get state funding. There are federal funds that come to our area. There are federal highway funds that can be flexed over for transit. And we've been somewhat successful in getting those, but not as much as we would like. So it would definitely be fantastic to get some additional funding. And then just one last comment on that. Capital Metro has been over the last few years kind of pulling ourselves out of a financial hole. About the time we had the economic problems, our reserves were depleted for a lot of various reasons, and we had some deferred capital that needed to be done. So we've been playing catch up for a few years. We're now to the point where we have money that we can, in addition to bus rapid transit, we can do some more things with adding service. You can always use more money, but I also want to look at ways we can be smarter with the money we have today. So it's a little bit of both.
Joseph, you sort of represent the private sector here. How can the private sector just generally, Ride Scout, anybody, step in here and sort of fill whatever Linda can't get to?
Right. I think there's a few things that employers can do very quick right now, which is be very flexible about start and end times for their own employees. If they just take their own office and divide them into thirds, okay, first third, you all, if you want, highly encourage you to come in early, and then you can leave early. Middle third of you, business as usual, and then a third of you, feel free to come in late, but your expectation is you'll stay a little bit later. That immediately can have an impact if huge organizations, huge University of Texas, City of Austin, State of Texas, if they start doing that with their employees, that'll make an immediate impact. But then the other piece too is just making sure, back to Ward's point earlier, is that they know that their options are there. I mean, there are still a lot of people who work in the downtown corridor who do not realize the benefits of Car2Go and B-Cycle and transit to be able to get down. They've heard about it, but they've never tried it. So I would just encourage them to try it with a friend who knows what they're doing, so that they don't hop on the wrong bus and go in the wrong way, and then we lose a potential transit rider, because it can be somewhat confusing sometimes. So there's a lot we can do just like that.
Well, I think that a couple things to keep in mind. I spent 27 years in the military, and everywhere I went, people would say, "You don't understand. I'm from Ohio and I like my car. I'm from Kansas, I like my car." So you get to Texas and you don't understand Texans like their car or their truck. Okay, given that, now what can we do? We kind of flirt in the Austin area a lot of times with our air quality. And there are some opportunities if our air quality goes up for congestion mitigation funding, but there's some real heavy prices that come with that. And I think that we should be doing a better job of explaining that to the community, that there are some real dangers in terms of growth, et cetera, if we get into the congestion mitigation. And I think that a broader understanding of programs, I think that we're a lot more flexible at the University of Texas with times and start times and end times. We do participate in commute to work type of activities, although it's perhaps not as great as it should be. But I think a lot of people looking at the Downtown Austin Transportation Management Association, if there are groups of people that want to explore opportunities to develop alternative transportation programs, they can certainly do that in conjunction with Joe and what he's got here. But there are a lot of opportunities here in the city of Austin to have people come in and look at your company, look at your organization, and to develop programs. Mobility Austin is one of them.
And Ward, I do want to give you a chance. You've been speaking about density sort of all afternoon. Specifically, as we go through this Code Next process, I imagine that your members would like to be able to build structures that can accommodate the sort of density that could perhaps mitigate some sort of traffic issues or whatever. What are there specific things you'd like to see in Code Next as we rewrite the city code for how we're going to develop some specifics there?
Just to let the private sector, create solutions that are innovative. And right now we have a code that's very restrictive. I think perhaps purposely so. But the so-called missing middle. We need more kinds of housing. We need townhomes. We need duplexes, threeplexes, wherever. Just various different types of housing. And Joe and I were talking earlier. I mean, why can't we have a bar in our neighborhood? Why do we have to make things so difficult so that you have to get in a car or get in some kind of form of transportation to go do things? We should have more things in our neighborhoods so that we don't need to use transportation to get around. I think we just need to have a much more flexible and innovative code for this rewrite, and we'll be on it, definitely.
Okay, Linda, when the density comes, should the density come, what in terms of data from other places, what does that mean for a transit system if you get a significant amount of density in the downtown corridor?
Well, it's mass transit to serve the masses, and what that means is the more similar trips you have, the easier it is to serve by transit. So the density does make it easier to serve. It will normally increase ridership. The most dense cities tend to have the best transit ridership. So it's good for transit.
We're sort of coming up. Please do.
In terms of design, University of Texas was a very car-oriented campus. Within the next 5 years, our core campus is going to be without cars. And that is a significant movement. Now, I'm not the most popular person when you mention that, but we're
I was
moving
going to ask,
out.
how's that going to happen?
Well, we're moving everything to the periphery, and we've kind of done the threshold from, well, first of all, the campus is landlocked. We got this thing called the Capitol and other places around it. We can't move very far. So anybody, every day I walk by a parking lot and I see a dean out there kind of doing this. Bob, I can get my building on that parking lot. And that's kind of what they're all being used for. And at the same time, then we're moving a lot of parking that we had into facilities, which cost more money, you know, the whole 9 yards. So I think that design of downtown, design of communities, I would go back to what Joe said. You know, I live 6 miles out of Georgetown, and every time I want to do anything, I gotta go 6 miles to go to the grocery or whatever, because there's nothing in my community.
Okay. I do want to get back to this notion of a sort of a car-free campus, just it sounds like by default. I mean, it seems like we're going to have to do an awful lot of mitigating to get that to happen. Right?
Well, we right now do an awful lot of inter-campus movement by mass transit when we work with Capital Metro. We are constantly in a battle between pedestrians and cars, pedestrians and bicycles, bicycles and pedestrians. Yeah. It depends on what mode you're in, what other two modes you don't like. So trying to mitigate the bicycle community on campus is something that is really forcing us to really rethink a lot of things. We don't have enough space to have bike dedicated lanes through the center of campus, but we try and intersperse bicycling with pedestrians, and then we've got cars, and it ends up being every day is a high adventure.
Sure.
And one last thing, when you talk about the private sector, I just want to make sure that we also understand the other pieces that we're trying to organize the Ride Scout are other components like Karma. Karma is a new technology that enables people to find neighbors or people in close proximity to where they live to where they work. They don't have to work at the same place. They don't have to live in the same neighborhood. But point of origin and destination are close enough that it's a ride matching through technology. And then there's also Metropia that got a partnership with the city and the region, I believe, to be able to look at just altering people's departure times. Even if your employer doesn't incentivize it, if you leave for your route 15 minutes earlier or 15 minutes later, you could experience huge changes in your commute time. And instead of being a part of the problem, your car's off the road or not on the road during the worst time. So a lot of other partners and opportunities. We just need to educate more people to know what's going on.
I think we got about 5 minutes left, so I'd like to take this opportunity to sort of give you all a chance to look outward, look at other cities in the country, in the world, who do things the way that you'd like to see things done in Austin. We'll start with you, Joseph.
Well, Washington, D.C. has done well over time in the fact that it planned for 30 years, really trying to lay out how it was going to build, especially their WMATA Metro rail system. And they let the community know how it was going to be built out over time. And then they built those systems. So they have good public transportation. They also have a good network of car-to-go, and they have Zipcar, and they have one of the most busy bike share programs. So I think Austin can do a lot to emulate a lot of the things that they do well. But where I think Austin has an opportunity to do even better than Washington, D.C. is we still have a lot of things we haven't tried yet. And so I'm most encouraged by being able to get that, because I would much rather live in Austin, Texas than in Washington, D.C. But they do have, it's a great town, but I would rather live here. They just have a lot more infrastructure in place, and we have to build that infrastructure virtually. And I think a lot of that comes through technology.
And hopefully there won't be any crazy leaks that close the metro system.
Well, exactly.
Bob?
I don't have an original idea in my head, never had one, but what we've been able to do is steal from everybody else. We look at all of our university partners to find out what they're doing, how they're doing it, and if it's good, we bring it back to the University of Texas and try and integrate it. We work very closely with Capital Metro, work very closely with the city to try and manage a lot of the activities that we have. So I think that what we've got to do is just to continue to grow our alternative transportation programs, get some break in terms of affordability of housing for particularly junior staff and faculty, and growth in carpooling pools where we can ride share from there would help us out quite a bit.
Are there any universities around the country that are doing things that you think are interesting?
The University of Washington does a lot, but they got pulled into that kind of kicking and screaming. And, you talk to the California schools and the West Coast schools, they're doing what would appear to be more but it's because of great burden placed on them by the state. And quite frankly, the state of Texas, we don't need to do that. We just need to do it ourselves.
All righty, Linda, other transportation systems that you'd like to see cabinet around?
Well, I would look within our state, a city in the southwestern part of the United States, Dallas, a very car-centric community that has done a good job of developing a transit system over probably about 30 years, 20 to 30 years. And they also, what I really, I guess I have regional envy of them, that they have so many communities, 20 plus communities that's part of the system. They're working together in a comprehensive way. It brings in significant dollars to the system for doing a regional high capacity system, and they've done a good job, I think.
Ward?
Again, I think bus and rapid bus is really our transit future. We flirted with rail for the past 20 years. It's been acrimonious. It hasn't passed. I think that ship has left, and we really ought to focus on a robust BRT system. I know that Cleveland and Kansas City have done wonders with their system. We talked about Houston. We'll be interesting to see how that redesign happens. But the other thing is technology. Joe alluded to it. When I did my blog on my 30 days off the road, things like Car2Go, B-Cycle, Uber and Lyft 3 years ago weren't even around. And when you look at things like driverless cars, Hyperloop, and I know it's personal rapid transit that Richard Gary is promoting, that's where we're going to be successful, I think. But for right now, let's take our bus system and expand it, blow it out, and use that as our basic transit form.
Mike, could I add one comment? We've got, in the transportation community, we've got to meet expectations. The expectation now of the people that I'm dealing with are to be able to use my phone, reserve my parking, plot my way in, check in with my phone, go to my concert, use the phone, come back out, check out with my phone, and go home. And we need to, it's a burden to me because I got to kind of keep up with the technology all the time in terms of buying new systems, et cetera. But that's the wave of the future. The wave of the future is to be much more customer focused, customer oriented, and be able to move people a lot faster.
Okay. I think, Jim, this means you get the last word.
All right, I'm going to try to sum it up and hit on a couple of things, but really I think it comes down for us what we're focusing on is technology, but then also how we work together. And we want to talk about a little bit about what folks are doing around the country. The signal, try to hit each of the modes. Signal priority for buses. I think there's more that we can do there, and more we can look also opportunities for dedicated lanes and so forth. One of the things that we're first here in Austin that we're testing out is basically using your phone. Bicyclists can download an app, turn on the app, and as they approach a signal, be detected.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's one of the first in the world. And so we're pursuing these technologies, and we see not only a use for cyclists in there, but also for pedestrians, visually impaired pedestrians, and being able to help them navigate through the city. In terms of working together, one of the things that we're working close with TxDOT and also Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority is operating the system as one system and not separate, not just operating arterial streets and then to stop when we get to the freeways, but looking at opportunities to operate them together so we can better respond to congestion that occurs every day. When incidents occur, maybe we can time the signals along the frontage roads during those incidents, or maybe even divert them over to parallel facilities. So a lot of opportunities there to work together and just pull as much capacity out of that system that we have right now.
Okay. Well, folks, I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys for watching online, for participating online. Thank you to MobilityATX for hosting this conversation. Take care.
And I encourage everyone to go to MobilityATX.com. Continue this conversation. Continue to put your ideas on there. And we're going to be sharing them all at a town hall on June 23rd. As a matter of fact, the mayor will be on that panel as well. So I look forward to talking to everybody again. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joseph.
Enjoyed it.
Call free.